music we making it touch your soul, take you to a place you never been before. Africa tunaikamia tu most bana. I'm Kenyan, so you know I'm a marathon runner.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel where we are looking at using the M-Pesa Daraja API using Django and React Native to make real-world mobile applications. In the last video, we introduced the concept of the mobile app that we want to build both for Android and iOS. And in this video, we'll be looking at the React Native aspects of things and how we are going to use this technology to make both of these apps. So, and I'm also going to cover why React Native specifically and Expo, and why not use other technologies that are out there. There's a lot of other languages or other technologies, if I can call them that can be used to make these Android apps. But why do I choose React Native and why do I think it's special? So just to take you a bit back, so far what we've been doing has primarily been Django and the backend and Heroku stuff. We did all the S3 stuff. We've not yet done Papertrail. We can be able to do that later on. We've also checked the database as well as the Django-rest-framework. And in this, going forward, we'll primarily be focusing more on the React Native aspect of things and Expo, and I'm going to explain what Expo is, and now the app deployment part. And of course, we'll be looking at other add-on services such as Firebase, especially for push notifications. So let's concentrate on React Native. What is React Native? So React Native is it's actually a library that was launched by Facebook that targets to make native applications both for Android and iOS. But the most unique thing about it is that it lets you build all these applications only using JavaScript. Traditionally, you had to write mobile apps either using Java, that is for Android, or Swift, or previously Objective-C for iOS. So far, you only write code in JavaScript, and this JavaScript code is then converted to either Android or iOS. So, but we know that JavaScript alone cannot be able to make mobile applications. So what React Native does is that it has real native bindings between JavaScript and native modules. So what they've done is that they've taken real native modules from Android and iOS, and they use JavaScript as a UI layer that manipulates these native modules, and this is only possible through a bridge. So what happens is that you write JavaScript code, there's a asynchronous bridge that is used the JavaScript to control the native bindings. So at the end of the day, React Native is going to compile your code and produce real native applications. This is different from other technology such as Ionic, and what Ionic does is that it writes a web view. So it's a native web view. So at the end of the day, it's a website which is made to look like a native app. But with React Native, you actually make native applications with native modules. But there's a catch. React Native as it is only comes as bare bones, and we are going to see as one of the disadvantages. So if you need access to other things, let's say you need access to navigation, that is compass or the gyros, if you need access to sound recording capabilities from the mobile phone, if you need access to the camera, if you need access to even contacts, for example, all this does not come shipped with React Native. So what you have to do is you have to look for third-party packages that can help you do that. And this is where Expo comes into place. So instead of going and looking for these third-party libraries for everything that you want to do, Expo is an SDK that gives you access to all these features on React Native. So think of Expo as Rails for Ruby, if you know the Ruby world. So with Expo, it gives us access to AR uploading, and we are going to do that a lot. Audio out session, contacts, camera, error recovery, face detection for the new phones that are coming out, gesture handling, image manipulator, image picker, which you are going to use a lot in the app that we discussed in the previous video, local authentication, splash screen, speech, SMS, sensors and all. Basically, it gives you an access to all these features that you can be able to access and use from your mobile phone, which is very awesome. Now, Ionic itself only gives you the web view, which it's not good. Okay. So I'm going just to quickly compare React Native, Ionic, and Java and Swift. Ionic is a framework that is centered on Angular 5, but it gives you more of, it's a web view component. So basically you write the same web app, but is wrapped in a native web view. So it's made to look like a native app. So, but the buttons are not real native buttons. Everything there is not native, but with React Native and Java and Swift, you get native. So in terms of performance, of course, so the way I've ranked this is that at least one of them is going to have 100 in whichever category. Then we can use that as a baseline to measure the, how the others compete. So in terms of performance, of course, Java and Swift, the traditional mobile apps, they are way faster compared to React Native and Ionic. The React Native aspect, why it's a bit slower even if it's native, is that at the end of the day, we have this JavaScript and the bridge system that is happening asynchronously, and sometimes if your JavaScript thread is down, and we are going to look at React Native performance in one of the videos, that also dramatically reduces. And also because React Native is still developing, some of the gestures and transition might not be as as sharp and smooth like Java and Swift, so it's still work in production. With Ionic, of course, I was even generous giving it as a 40, but if you don't have a very heavy application, Ionic is good. You get like almost half of what you'll get at React Native. But in my experience, once you start building real heavy and complex mobile applications, then Ionic becomes significantly slower, because again, at the end of the day, it's just a browser with a web app. So if we look at write once, reuse everywhere. So with Java and Swift, it's actually supposed to be a 0. I've put 1, but you cannot use the skills that you have in Java and use the code or the skills to write Swift. These are totally different use cases. So if you want to write for Java, you need to learn Java. If you want to write Swift, you need to have another person who knows Swift, but you cannot transfer your skills from Java to Swift. When it comes to Ionic, it takes the crown here because it's a web view, it's a browser, it can run in any mobile device. So you write once, it's deployed, and it can be used for either platform without major tweaking. For React Native, ideally it's supposed to be at 100, but as we are going to find out, even if you write code for Android, there's still some settings or some aspects that you need to write separate code for Android and separate code for iOS. And I'll give you an example. So for example, when you are sharing, let's say you want to share text via WhatsApp, or you want to prompt user to share some information. Let's say it's a product and you can share that via WhatsApp, email, or other things. So you'll find that when you're writing that code, it will be different, targeting different platforms. So there's a major tweaking. So I can say it's about 80% code sharing, and you can tweak the other 20%, although the building part becomes easy. There's another point that I need to point out here about this is writing once and reusing everywhere. When it comes to learning once and reusing everywhere, it's also pretty much the same. With React Native, you have to learn it once, similar to Ionic, but for Java, you have, to learn both of them. So when it comes to pre-built styling, so this is pre-built styling. I mean, When you start off with Java and Swift, so when it comes, for example, like buttons, you find that the buttons they provide you, they're already pre-styled, similar to Ionic. But when it comes to React Native, out of the box, the buttons look ugly. Everything is not styled. I mean, it's there, but it's not styled. So you have to do a lot of styling yourself. So depending on how you look at it, for me, I actually like it a lot because that means I can style my app however I want. So I do the work from the ground up. But in terms of trying to build apps quickly, and we are going to see these perhaps 2 videos from now, you have to do majority of the styling yourself. So it can be an advantage or a disadvantage from however you look at it. But with Java, you can be able to bootstrap a lot of these scroll views, a lot of drop downs, a lot of calendar views. Everything is already pre-built, and you can do minor tweaking, which is good. When you look at the ecosystem, so here by ecosystem, I mean how many apps are already in production, how many apps, how many companies are already using this, and basically, and how many developers are there. Of course, when it comes to Java and Swift, either of them, majority of developers are already using Java and Swift. Majority of applications that we have in Play Store are Java and Swift. When it comes to React Native, I can say now the ecosystem is growing faster than it is for Ionic for obvious reasons, and I foresee perhaps if it continues with this trend, perhaps I foresee perhaps in 5 years time that React Native will be dominating. So when it comes to native access, this is what I was talking about access to cameras, access to sensors, access to manipulating notifications on your mobile phone, access to, SMS and calling, and all these features that a normal mobile phone has. Of course, Java and Swift, they take the crown here. So for example, if you want to build a very specialized app like counting steps of when people are walking and stuff, it's way easier, and the native access to Java and Swift is already built there and is perfected. For React Native, you're still trying to find majority of these and integrating them. Expo is doing a great job, but it does not have access to everything, and even the access that we have for some of the things is way complex. So so far I've tried to build apps that record audio, record video, that do map, and tracking people. It's still hard because at the end of the day, you are writing JavaScript bindings to these native modules, and sometimes in that asynchronous workflow does not come out clearly. So it's still a work in progress. You can still find majority of them also in third-party packages, but hopefully soon we'll be able to have all access that other Java and Swift has with native access. Of course, Ionic is limited because it's just a web view, so it becomes difficult when you're writing for a web view. For example, let's you say like you want to make an app that is, tracking the movement through your gyro and counting steps, or maybe you want to build an app that is tracking your order. It can be done, but it's very difficult in this case. So when it comes to popularity, so I know you're expecting here to say that Java and Swift. By what I mean by popularity, I mean is by the rising popularity presently. So I'm going to take you quickly to my browser, and I'm going to search these projects on GitHub. So let me start off with React Native. Just going to quickly Google this, and I'm going to open the GitHub. Let's see if I can find. Yes, this is the GitHub repository. I'm also going, no, I'll just use this. And there's something I wanted to show. There was a recent survey that was done, and that showed if you compare the most popular open source projects. So I'm here going to search VS Code. I'm also going to search Swift. I'm also going to search Ionic. I might also search something like Python. I might also search something like JavaScript out of curiosity. JavaScript, I don't know if it's an open source in okay, JavaScript is not there. Don't know if Python is here. Okay, Python is not. So This is Ionic. This is Apple. Of course, Apple makes Swift for iOS. VS Code is made by Microsoft. And here we have React Native. So a recent study was done and it showed that the most popular open source projects in the entire planet is React Native followed by VS Code. So if you come here and React Native, you'll find that it has 77,000 stars. And also the number of contributors is almost 2,000. And so far we had 16,000 commits. And remember, even for React Native, we are not in version 1 yet. We are still at 0.59 or something. So if you compare that with VS Code, which you are using to code, you'll find VS Code has 76,000 stars, almost trailing, and only about 1,000. And VS Code is the second most popular open source project on earth. So if you come to Apple, you'll find it's almost half of what React Native is and almost half of the contributors. If you come to Ionic, it's even less than React Native as well as the contributors. So as it stands right now, and I cannot stress this enough, React Native, despite just coming out the other day, is the most popular library or framework out there, and it's going to even to go up. So I'm going to go back to the slides, and the popularity that React Native is having is insane. So far, the companies that are using React Native, Facebook is using React Native in one of the, I think, the ads for the ad program. Twitter is using React Native for the Twitter Lite app. Airbnb was the biggest one, which was using React Native at a larger scale, but as of last year, they've discontinued the use of React Native because of scaling issues. But that one you can understand because of the scale of Airbnb. I know Wix.com is using React Native, and countless other companies. I also believe that Instagram is using React Native. I also believe, I'm not sure, but I can check, but I also think that Pinterest is using React Native and countless other. And also for me, all my projects nowadays, I use React Native. So at the end of the day, when we aggregate all those points that we are awarding, again, this is my own personal view. It can be disputed by other people, still okay. But I still believe that with Java and Swift, they take the award of the day at about 80% of average, because it has high performance and it has all native modules. That access is good. The cons, the learning curve. So I was joking the other day and I told somebody, they asked me, what are your career goals? And I told them, one of my career goals is to never write Android ever in my life. I'm not a huge fan of object-oriented programming. I still believe it's not friendly, especially to new learners. And also the reusability factor. I need to learn a lot about Android, and now when I want to write my similar app to Swift, I have to go to another steeper learning curve, although Swift is generally less complex compared to Objective-C. So when it comes to Ionic, on this other side, the advantage is that you write once, it can be used in any phone, but the cons is performance, and the access to native components is pretty much non-existent. So basically you are writing a web view, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Also, in my opinion, I'm going to tell you my story about Ionic in the following video when you're doing installation, but ideally, initially, I really wanted to use Ionic because coming from Python and using a lot of HTML, I liked Angular a lot, because Angular is about HTML and you inject, how Angular works with HTML. It was good for me. Actually, true story, I never used to love React. When I wanted to go into the front-end part of things, I prefer to use Angular, but at the end of the day, I looked at performance and scaling, and it was a huge problem. The first time I looked at React, I hated it. Like, I looked at the syntax, and we're going to do this in the next video, and I immediately hated it. I didn't like the JSX syntax. We are going to look at how JSX looks like. I was not a huge fan of JavaScript coming from Python because I had done a lot of work with map applications, and I didn't like, JavaScript. And but I can tell you that once I started once I learned React, it has a less steep learning curve compared to Angular. But once you go React, you never go back. And now I can say that React is like one of my favorite things to do. So this one, at least for React Native, you learn once, we will write everywhere. We have pure native apps. The cons, I can say, just styling. We will spend a lot of time styling and placing components. And again, the thin bare bones. So for any additional packages we want, for styling, we have to install additional packages. For state management, we have to add additional packages. For map and all these other things, we have to install all these third-party packages to do that. And sometimes it can get hectic what to choose and what. Of course, even if React Native is coming in second, that's what we are going to use. And I hope that this video has explained why I'm choosing React Native, why I prefer it. I think the future points to React Native, and I'm going to stand with that. So as always, if you're finding me for the first time, please make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I also have my GitHub URL where I'll be posting all the code. In the next video, we are going to start now the actual coding, where we are going to install React Native and Expo, our emulators, as well as how to use it on the phone. And we'll start a basic application. Then from there, we'll start with our Ploti app, where we'll be making the localized e-commerce app for estates and people living in localized communities. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.